Welcome to Board Certified, expert interview episodes about medical licensing exams and healthcare careers. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we offer affordable adaptive online prep courses for the USMLE Step 1, MCAT, PTCE, NPTE, and others. Each course contains everything you need to succeed, including comprehensive study guides, video lessons, thousands of practice questions powered by our memory enhancing algorithm, and full length practice exams. You can get a free trial of any course by going to achievable.me. And if you like it, be sure to use the code podcast to save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today, we've got Angelo Moreno from IFMSA, and I'd love if you can introduce yourself in IFMSA.
Thank you, Tyler, for the invitation. My name is Angelo Moreno. I'm a just graduated medical doctor from Quito, Ecuador, and currently I am the president of the IFMSA. The IFMSA stands for the International Federation of Medical Students Association. We are an NGO based in the Netherlands that represents 132 national member organizations and a total of 1.5 million medical students. We work in diverse advocacy fields, and our main goals is to connect the voice of medical students to the global health and encourage them to be part of this global leadership.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'd love to have you talk to us about basically like what are NGOs, what is IFMSA, and what is the reason for their existence? Just give us kind of an overview of the whole thing.
NGOs, especially in the area, are groups of people that can share a common background, medical students, patients, medical doctors, any profession or any background that wants to work outside the governments or the private companies for a specific goal, specific objective. Most of these NGOs are non-profits, or actually all the NGOs are non-profits. So their main aim is not to get capital, but actually impact through their goals, established
Mhm.
goals.
Yeah, and so can you give me some examples of what some of those goals might look like? You could talk about your agency's goals, but you can also, give some examples of other big NGOs and what their goals are too.
Yes, let's start with the IFMSA. As mentioned, the IFMSA is an NGO. Let's get back to some history to understand what are the objectives of the IFMSA. The IFMSA was built after the Second World War, and in that moment, in that broken world, the IFMSA had the objective to connect medical students and to connect medical science. At the beginning, it was through students exchanges, but then it kept evolving. It kept evolving, covering different fields or different aspects of health itself. So, for example, the IFMSA now, what do we do is connecting medical students. That's the main objective, and we connect them through different actions. As the IFMSA, there are also other NGOs, for example, the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Medical Students with a similar approach than us, but also like bigger or broader ones, for example, the World Medical Association, the International Red Cross, Red Crescent Societies, the World Federation of Public Health Associations. So basically, they group themselves professionals aiming for one goal. One that is also really famous in field medicine is Medicine Without Borders. So these are the type of NGOs. In the IFMSA, we started connecting medical students first through medical exchanges, but now we also do advocacy, medical education, public health, human rights and peace, research, and also reproductive health rights.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, and I think it's just important for our listeners to understand how organizations like yours make an impact and why governments are not already doing the things that you are doing, or maybe existing foreign aid isn't covering the things that you guys are covering, right?
Yes, I think that that's connected with the strong, let's say, vision or dream that is behind every NGO. So, for example, the government has a lot of things to care about. Like a government is a big platform caring about all the different aspects of a society. While when you have a big vision or a dream that is specifically focused, I don't know, in this case, health policy, you gather people extremely committed that could support the efforts of the government. Also, you gather the main actors, like most of the decisions of the government sometimes are taken behind desks, behind political negotiations, while the people that are actually affected are the ones working on them. So that's why it's
Mhm.
also like great to have these changes from the experience itself, from the people that are living itself.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, you have a bit more flexibility because of that, right? I mean, essentially, obviously, you're beholden kind of to your donors, but otherwise, you can kind of operate almost as a startup in a sense, right? And maybe pursue programs that, you know, other groups wouldn't pursue. Do you feel like that's correct?
While the objective stays between the borders of the mission or vision, let's say, yeah, you are more free to try to even adapt yourself to the changes that you want.
Hmm.
Yes, an association is based on their members, and of course, their members should be agreeing on this. But usually, as these objectives are under the frame or the mission and the vision is, it's relatively more easier and more flexible than actually working in more rigid structures.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, so then let's talk a bit about, what are the areas that NGOs typically work in. And again, like you can talk about what you guys do, and obviously there's other ones. I mean, you mentioned a pharmaceutical student association that was similar to you. You mentioned obviously like the Red Cross, right? Like, what are kind of the main areas that you see medical NGOs working in?
Medicine and health are part of every aspect of our society. Currently, l- by examples, by the conferences or congress that we have been attending the whole year, as health is now a broad topic, we of course work in the most obvious spaces. For example, the World Health Organization in the World Health Assembly, in the meetings of their executive board meetings. The World Health Organization have 5 regional offices, so also we work directly with them. But those are like, let's say, the obvious ones or the ones that people imagine. But behind that, there are also conferences right now on air pollution and health, on climate change and health, on digital health, on how AI and ethics are shaping medicine, are shaping healthcare. So I think that the list is infinite, and even in the spaces that are not that connected to health, or you don't think that there is an obvious connection, now these spaces are being bring. Let's let's give an example of one conference that is now taking more like this aspect. There is the United Nations Conference of Paris, the COP, that is a conference of the United Nations focused on climate change. And since 3 years ago, there is one day now focused only on world health and global health. And this happened because there were some NGOs, some collectives that were actually raising the voice 3 years ago, making a small comments, a small noise during this conference. And now one day is only focused on the impacts of climate change and in the impacts of air of pollution and on health. So as this is one small successful example, there are like a lot of involvement of these NGOs in urban planning, sanitization, immigration, humanitarian aid, so these type of topics. So health is everywhere on these days. Health is everywhere.
Right. Yeah, and I think that I think it's an important set of topics for really all of us to be considering. But I'd love to dig in on like the practical roles that NGOs play, both in the conversation, right, where they're very important, but also in the actual implementation of programs.
Yes, and that's actually a good question about NGOs, because I think that there is a duality of this, because there is this big conversations, big letters, big negotiations happening, and then they get approved and they are supposed to have changes, and that's where NGOs plays a role. But also the local changes, the communitarian changes, where actually the daily change happens. So I'm talking about this duality because in global NGOs, you are expected to have both of them. let's go practical to the big changes or the big discussions during the past World Health Assembly. Mm, on May 2025, there was the pandemic treaty agreement passed by the World Health Assembly. Youth had a role on development and writing some points on this agreement. And then after the agreement was read, five medical students go from each one of the regions of the WHO, raised the voice and give a speech after the agreement in the sense of giving like a connection between generations. So that's like the big involvement, of course, the negotiations behind doors, we're also involved with, etc. But then we also have the daily and the one that you can feel it when you are like in the daily life. That is the local communitarian work, especially in terms of NGOs in healthcare or medicine. There is also a sense of altruism or a sense of helping each other in medical professions and healthcare professions. So to our 132 national members organizations, we conduct over 6,000 like local projects or local activities each year, and they are focused in broad in a lot of different topics. We have had, for example, a program to support to get people's like healthier through a sporty life and also through the involvement of soccer in Cameroon past term. Or we also have projects in Ecuador on how to teach people medical language to sign a language. We have like this type of several examples all over the world. We have blood donation campaigns coordinated nationally between associations with the governments in Slovenia or Romania. So these are like the type of things that have local impact. Of course, what do we do from the international side? Because it's really hard to actually follow up and implement directly, is to set the guidelines and set the compass of the discussion. Like bring topics to discussion so it has global influence too.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that work is very important, right? And you're doing a lot of things that are helping a lot of people all over the world, but oftentimes, you know, are maybe not, I want to say, like, not as celebrated as they should be, basically. And so I'm curious, I mean, first question I have is kind of if students, like medical students that are listening to this, want to start thinking about contributing their time and effort to either non-government organizations or just other nonprofits, where would they start and how would you recommend that they start looking at this space?
The easiest path to get like even into global hair leadership is looking around you and being a local champion. If you want to get into local initiatives, into national initiatives, into global or regional initiatives, let's start with your local community. For example, as medical students, we have the privilege of interact with several patients every week. We also have the privilege to be a trustworthy voice in terms of society. The medical professions is one of the professions with the highest rating of trust of people. So it's looking around you and start to making these small changes. You don't need to actually connect quickly with a national NGO, with a global NGO, but you can start doing your individual things. And then you will start finding people that are having the similar objectives, or even in the work university that you have, in the hospital that you work, or the community that you have, there is always these spaces of people trying to make this local impact. In terms of, for example, the US, is there is like one association, there is one national association of medical students, that is the American Medical Student Association. They have chapters in each one of in most of their universities, so you can also connect with them, and they have advocacy than the IFMSA has, of course, more focus on the priorities of the place that they are working in the US. So
Mhm.
to be a global leader, you need to start being a local champion and seeing the problems where they are not and trying to bring yourself in.
Well, and I think it's just important to understand that as a healthcare professional, you'll be in a unique position to provide help that most people cannot provide. And, I don't want to say, I mean, I'm not in the industry, so I feel like I can't say that it's like your duty to do it, right? But I do think that a big part of what draws people to the healthcare profession is to help others. And on the other side of things, at least in the United States, if you're in the healthcare profession, you're often extremely busy and overwhelmed. So it's hard to find time for other things. I'm curious, how do you balance your commitment to your NGO with the other things you've got going on from your career to your school and things like that?
It's really complicated, to be honest. It's really complicated because I think that there is a moment it depends on the time of the career where you are, where you kind of start deciding where do you give your next step. What's your next plan? Some people actually connected directly, really fast with the clinical practice, with the surgical practice, and that's really time consuming. Other people go more for the global health, national health side. So it's really hard. It's really hard. I think that working on a routine plays a big role, and dividing your time in a sense that you also don't lose the other side of you. And the part of working on NGOs and getting too much into the advocacy, bureaucratic part, and administrative part is that at the end of the day, you have a formation of a high skill formation, and that you don't need to forget that either, because that also gives you skills to your daily life in your NGO life or your associative life. But to be honest, in a career as medicine is challenging, but highly rewarding at the end. But it's challenging.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think that I would say probably people would say the same thing about working with NGOs, right? That it's challenging, but it's highly rewarding in the end. When did you first start working with NGOs? Was it while you were a student, and how did you get involved?
Well, we are connected with NGOs even if we don't realize it. I think that it started when I was in high school without unconsciously. In my high school, there was an scout movement. There is like the Boy Scout movement, the World Scout
Mhm.
movement organization. So there was a local chapter in my high school. I joined it just to spend better my free time, I guess. I was looking for some outdoor activities, some campings, developing some of those skills. But then I realized that the group itself has other objectives besides development of scouting in youth people. They is actually serve the people, and this actually serve a local community, have a live the word in a better way that you found it. So unconsciously in high school, through this involvement of these organizations, I was kind of start connecting with it. Also in my high school, there was on Saturdays there was an association that worked directly with the poorest people of the city, and they used to give them some education and some food and even sometimes healthcare services. And because of being part of my high school, I was invited. So it was being unconscious until I reached medical school. University is a whole universe itself. You find clubs of everything. I come from a liberal arts college, so there was everything available. But I remember that there was a project on how to read or how to analyze X-rays.
Mhm.
X-rays for basic for medical students, and it was organized by my local committee. And that was when I realized how also NGOs have their impact locally. I talked with the people on why they were doing this. If at the end we also received this in med school, why are you taking
Mhm.
extra of your time to put this effort into this? And then I realized that there is a big world of people doing this. After working in my local committee, I went to my national association, then I went to the regional work of the federation itself, and after some experience, I became vice president of this federation and now the president. So it's also a funny journey because you also you discover what is the real impact you have through you are like scaling up. It's not that because I'm the president, I have a lot of power, but it's more like about the influence too.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you can multiply your influence basically by joining one of these organizations, right? If you're just by yourself and you're trying to get the World Health Organization to listen to your email, it's not really going to work. But if you work as part of a group like yours and send an email, it can have a lot more impact. And I think that's actually a nice segue into kind of my next question, which is I'd love to hear about the biggest and most rewarding experiences that you've had as a part of working in NGOs so far. And you can feel free to brag about, your work with IFMSA, or it could be something else. But just like give people an idea of what are some of the things that you can do, even as just somebody who just graduated medical school as a part of one of these organizations.
Wow, let's start with one story that inspired me. I did not realize how impactful it was going to be, but there was a medical student from Africa. I don't remember which country, from Central Africa. And through our exchanges program, we connect like medical students with the opportunity to make a rotation of 1 or 2 months of a specific specialty in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So this member went to Europe, and that member requested the support from the IFMSA to obtain their visa. After the IFMSA supported, that medical student got their visa, and one shocking reality is that that medical student didn't have that specialty that they were going to rotate in Europe in their own country. If I am not wrong, it was like a high specialty about neck surgery or ENT. The
Mm-hmm.
thing is that this chapter, this exchange, when the medical student went back to Africa, these medical students started to advocate to actually get this specialty and get like something around this specialty in their country. And this is like a story that happened only 5 years ago, something like that. I only received like the info because they sent us an email updating us, kind of telling this story. So this is one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that you, just by signing a letter to request a visa, you can actually have an impact in the whole medical system of a country. I hope that now medical doctor gets implemented the idea, but yeah, that's one of the things. And then there are also like these small interactions around people, as you mentioned, influence and inspire people. A small conversation with a national leadership, for you a small conversation, but then if you are wise enough to give them the correct information or the correct tools, then 1, 2, 3 weeks later, 1 month, 6 months later, they will come back to you and update you on how your advice impacted them. Then in terms of, let's say, personal opportunities, because it's this, at the end, we're also humans that have our objectives in life besides being in the NGOs. Being in this type of positions give you a good position, let's say, when you are talking with members that have power or that may interest that you are interested to work on. For example, the National Health Ministry, or the dean
Mm-hmm.
of your university, or people from your city council. When they see that you have done, even by the name, you have worked on this, they also are more like open to listen to you. So I have this journey have given me like the chance to talk with my Ministry of Foreign Affairs, um, with my Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to get opportunities to later on represent my country in these global health spaces, or to members of other bigger organizations, other NGOs that then later on invite you to be part of their organization. And then I think that I went around the question about rewarding moments. In one of my biggest moments, rewarding moments, was after the pandemic. It was May 2021. I was the regional director for the Americas of the FMSA. So I basically coordinated like the organization from the US to Chile, like all the members of the region. And we came after the pandemic, and the pandemic really hit us because most of our interactions are through exchanges and to regional meetings, general assemblies. So we did not have the motivation, and there was a lack of member engagement because of one of the biggest rewards were stopped. But I organized a training event. It was aimed for medical students in 6 different workshops. And we got people from all over the region. We got at least 100 medical students. But after seeing what were the outcomes, we trained some group in global health advocacy, we trained other group in leadership, we trained other group in human rights, in medical education, how they can advocate in medical education. But after seeing that it was connecting again to the reality before pandemic, but then seeing what was like the outcomes of these trainings, a lot of these medical students became leaders in their national, in their country, in their even at global stage, in the IFMSA, but in other NGOs. They start working with their government in national health policy. So it's how this just a small decision of saying, yeah, we're going to have this workshop in Bogota actually brought us to have one medical student, one alumni, being advisor to the Ministry of Health of one country. So it's funny. You don't see it at the moment, and then life gives you like the rewards later too.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such a cool story. And it just, again, just shows kind of the impact, the outsized impact that you can have. And I'm curious then, you know, one of the questions I wanted to ask today was like, if there's somebody who's a medical student or someone in the profession that is interested in joining one of these organizations, I think what I'd love for you to explain is how teaching someone how to fish as opposed to telling them which websites to go to, like tell them how to find what they're looking for. Because I think what everyone's interested in is a little different. How would you go about finding an organization that fits with what your goals are and what your specialty is?
Okay, I think that first of all you need to establish what is your objective, your biggest objective of advocacy. If you want to work in human rights, if you want to work on emergency medicine, so first like set like what is your biggest objective, your biggest area of work, and then try to search for the organizations that are already involved in. For example, in terms of health, if you want to be involved in the discussions of the World Health Organization, of the Pan American Health Organization, you can just go. Luckily, they have their information really available, so you can just go to their website, go to the list of attendees of the last WHO meeting, of the last PAHO meeting, and go there. And then you will start to see. They are called non-state actors. So you'll see in the list of attendees after all the countries, a list of 30, 40 NGOs that are attending to that place. Maybe one of those NGOs fit you, and maybe you would like to work on one of these NGOs, so then you connect with them. And that's also like in all the United Nations and in all of these multilateral like conferences, you may have access to the list of attendees. So, and they are public available in internet. So you can just go and search for it, list of attendees to the World Health Assembly, I don't know, 77, that was this one in May. And then you can find the list of these organizations. In the World Health Organization, there is a list of around 230 associations or NGOs that are partners with the IFMSA, and they can go as really non like as us as the FMC, but it also can go to really corporative level as the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, where most of these big companies are part of it. So it's
Mhm.
also like kind of going in and then just finishing with the other part. And if you are already in a place where you already have your community, let's say you are in the pharma company, you are, I don't know, along specialties, there are like groups of people around your own background that actually work directly with them. So they're always there, trying to search for the events, trying to search for the attendees list. Now asking to artificial intelligence text like creators, you can also ask them, but and then local, community, national, regional, global. I think that you get experience and you just keep growing.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. And I wanted to also, as my final question here, I want to talk about looking ahead. And I feel, like some of this is going to be speculative, obviously, but I think also you probably have a pretty good understanding of what are the major problems that NGOs are focused on right now. And I'd love if you could tell me a bit about what are the kind of big picture topics that you think will be important topics in the future for NGOs to tackle. And then also, what are going to be the biggest challenges for NGOs in influencing the future of healthcare?
A good question. And I think that it can be divided depending on the scope of your work. For example, local communitary systems are created by the society. So they are kind of influenced by the society. So it's easier to still work on them. The problem there is that you don't have enough money. But then the biggest problem when you go like at national and global level is the current polarization and the current lack of diplomacy and multilateralism that we have been facing lately on. In we are in a moment where democracies are being questioned and that values that have been carrying some countries can be changed immediately by the fact of 3, 4, 5 months. And
Mhm.
without talking about any in specific or without going to any in specific, just by the fact that a government changes their policies or strictly or radically in 3, 4, 5 months, that impacts the fundraising of some NGOs, also the how
Mhm.
accepted by the society or how carried by the media is one topic in specific. And I think that we are in a moment of humanity where we are facing again big powers colliding, polarizing. That would be the main challenge because NGOs they are strong by their members, but at the end they are members of bigger societies, of nations, of other bigger powers that we cannot control. And
Mhm.
we are facing it now. Lately on, we have been seeing a lot of NGOs if, struggling with their fundraising because of changes in politics, or even because as the changes in politics are also carry the popularity of people. As these policies are not popular anymore, they just don't work on them anymore. So let's say the market of policies, the market of popularity of politicians and how that create a polarization kind of can stop like the objective or especially humanitarian NGOs.
Yeah, I think you put it really eloquently, right? That it's sort of this deprioritization of multilateralism. At the end of the day, we are on one planet together, and we're all we're all going to have to deal with climate change and pandemics and a lot of other issues, hunger, right? Things like that, even things like polio. And cooperation is the only way that we will be able to solve all of these problems in the long term. And also, yeah, just like how NGOs are so reliant on having it be sort of an environment that looks good so that fundraising can take place and projects can get greenlit, right? So, yeah, those are major challenges for sure. I mean, do you have any further commentary on how you think NGOs are going to overcome those challenges or still working on it?
Adapting to the situation. NGOs are also like even when they are neutral, they are also political subjects. We call ourselves in multilateral spaces or big diplomacy spaces civilian society. So at the
Mhm.
end, NGOs need to draft a little bit around the policies of their governments. If they are maybe changing their approach with something, change also like also the mission, not the mission, but the way that you're achieving that. Of course, not giving up your values, but
Right.
in a fragile moment like this, in a fragile moment like this, you don't want to disappear either. And then
Hmm.
also uniting in solidarity like NGOs that are focused on specific things. You are not alone. You have NGOs like that all over the world. And then if you unite alone all each other and also this is like a practical tip and it's like what does the NGO offers besides the humanitarian aspect of this of their work? And I'm trying to say donations to NGOs help for tax exemption, for example. Donations for NGOs for municipality or city councils gives like visibility, especially in global NGOs. So also, what are these practical, legal, financial benefits that you give to the society? Because that's why governments also set the rules for NGOs, because you can also the NGOs also give things to the society. So how you can get advantage of these small things to actually run out of your NGO? For example, one activity, we have one grant in the IFMSA that is for the best project, not for the best project, but for the most impactful project that has a projection of development. And we have a grant, and this grant is collected by donations. And this type of things also like because donations help the donators to some tax exemption. They donate some money to IFMSA, and we just carry it to a local action project.
Right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Do you have anything else that you wanted to make sure we covered today before we wrap up? Anything that I missed?
I just wanted to reflect on something really important that you mentioned, and is how connected we are. And now that we know how global chains work, how we get products from all over the world, and how, in terms of traceability of humanity, like of human beings, it just will take me, I don't know, 48 hours to be connected with someone that was connected in China 1 or 2 weeks. So this type of context, we are in a moment of the world that we are connected with all humanity, probably the most connected, and we're in this the most connected moment ever of the humanity. So it's a global responsibility, even besides political views, political motivations. The
Mhm.
connection around the world on essential things like health is essential for humanity to keep being here. Like we saw that one mistake in Southeast Asia caused or one interaction in Southeast Asia caused a big global event, and that was not the first, and it won't be the last. So it's really important what you mentioned. Globalization is here, and it's essential for a doctor right now, for a healthcare worker to understand how even globalization is part of the health of individuals too.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. I totally agree. Well, thank you so much. This has been Board Certified, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Angelo Moreno from IFMSA. And Achievable has great online courses for the USMLE Step 1, MCAT, PTCE, and PTE, and others. You can try them out for free at achievable.me.